Hi everyone, my name is Bjorn. I'm the founder of Build Up Nepal. And Build Up Nepal is an organization working with compressed stabilized earth bricks for reconstruction after the earthquake. And I wanted to start by going through and explaining a bit like why we started working with this technology and why we think that this is the most suitable technology for reconstruction in many of Nepal's villages. So it happened actually immediately after the earthquake. Me, some of my friends and colleagues, we were out and we were working on the early phase recovery. We were building up temporary shelters, and at that time we started thinking like, how can we rebuild long term? And we did a number of experiments. We thought like, in order to rebuild in the remote villages of Nepal, we have to, number one, we have to use local materials. We have to use the things that is already there, because transporting things on small dirt roads and sometimes to villages that don't even have road at all is not feasible. And more importantly, it also doesn't really create a development in those villages. So our core idea is that we have to build in such a way that we not only rebuild the country, but we also create jobs which work to eliminate poverty. We create a development in those villages. So keeping that in mind, we decided that reconstruction should happen with local materials. And then we went through a phase where we did some experimentation. We built with bamboo, we built something with earth bags, and we built with earth bricks. And in the meantime, when we were working on this, it was quite challenging in the beginning, right after the quake. It was chaos out there, no one knew exactly what they wanted. But what we found quite soon was that after doing the structures, all of them came up in a very good way, but it was very clear when asking the locals, what kind of house do you prefer? What's your dream house? Everyone said the same thing. They basically said, I want a brick house. I think what happens is that in Nepal, most of the wealthier people, the richer people, they live in houses built by bricks and concrete. And this is what most of the villagers are looking up to. This is what they would want to be able to afford. One day, I want to live in a house built by bricks. And what we saw very clearly was when our first earthquake house came up, in the beginning, people were a little bit skeptical. But once the walls started coming up and they could see for themselves like, wow, it looks like a brick house, and it is like a brick house. It's built by reinforcements in the same way that we build in the cities. They became very, very excited and adopted the technology and wanted to rebuild the whole village in this way. And that's when we decided that we want to focus on this technology. We want to focus on rebuilding with earth bricks because we believe that it is a way that we can both create local jobs, we create local opportunities, and at the same time, we also give the villagers the kind of structure that they dream of. We'll take a short break. Come on in, everyone.
So you may have to revisit this because I think they will enjoy the start.
You know, let's do it over again. You can cut it anyway, no?
Yes, sir.
Hi, everyone. What do you study?
Here, come up front.
Come a few a little closer.
Come up here. You need to be close enough to throw rotting vegetables.
They are from my department, architecture department. Other students also come to their presentation.
Okay. How long will it take for them to come? Is it worth waiting, or? I mean, if it's like 5 minutes, then it's better we wait and let people come. If it's 20 minutes, then...
Just a moment. They have one presentation.
Okay.
After finishing, they will come, but I don't know.
That will take some time. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start.
Then we'll get started.
Yeah. But now we've got a good audience.
Yeah, now we got a good audience. I'm very happy you came because it was getting lonely up here. So, my name is Bjorn. I'm the founder of Build Up Nepal. I'm from Sweden originally, but I've been living in Nepal for the past 15 years, working with social business. And Build Up Nepal, we are a small social organization, actually a non-profit company, a team of engineers, architects, builders, social entrepreneurs working to rebuild using earth bricks. And the reason why we started building with earth brick was like immediately after the earthquake. We were out, especially in Sindupal and Dari, and we were working on the early relief work. And we were trying to figure out also, like, when going from the quick relief, building up some temporary shelters, into building permanent houses, how can we do this and what are the most important aspects? And at that point, it was just 2 months after the quake, we decided, like, in order to build more long term, we wanted to think, the things we wanted to achieve was we wanted to build in such a way that we can rebuild in an affordable way, but also rebuild in such a way that we actually develop those villages. I believe that bringing foreign construction materials that we bring from Kathmandu, or eventually we might, in so many cases, we bring from India to Kathmandu, transport them out to a remote village that is 8 hours away from here, walk the last 2 hours up, doesn't make any sense. And more importantly, it does not develop that village. Because the most important thing here, when we're looking at why this catastrophe has become so big, is because the villages that was hardest hit by the earthquake is suffering from a lot of poverty. People cannot afford good houses, and unless we solve the problem not only of house reconstruction but also of poverty, this is not likely to change in the next earthquake. So therefore, when we looked at rebuilding permanently, we wanted to find a combination of how do we build something that is safe, that is earthquake resistant, and that also create local jobs, local opportunities in those villages and communities. Please take a seat. Welcome. So keeping that in mind,
Can you put it in your name?
well, I'll press something.
You'll see if it explodes.
Is it all right? Exactly. All right. So keeping that in mind, we thought like when rebuilding, we started looking at different technologies, different materials. But the core focus was we have to rebuild those villages using as much local materials as possible. Because using local materials, we will create local jobs, local opportunities. And we will get away from all these transportation hassles and problems. So we started out, first we built a few houses in Sodorberg from bamboo. We did some building with earth bags, and we did some building construction with earth bricks. And it was quite difficult in the beginning. Our bamboo houses, no one was very excited about them. The beneficiaries who got the houses were happy, but when we asked the other locals, like, do you want to copy this technology and build it this way? It didn't seem like that. And then we went back a little bit, and we started doing what we should have done in the first place. We went and asked each and every person in the village where we were working, what's your dream house? We asked them, like, what are you, if you got to choose what kind of house to live in, what does your dream house look like? And every single one of the people we asked said the same thing. I want a brick house. Because what I think is happening is that almost everyone living in those villages, they would want to live, the people living in Kathmandu, in the cities, they look up to the people with more money who are living in houses made by brick and concrete. They also know that these houses mostly withstood the earthquake in a much better way. So after that we decided to focus on this technology called earth bricks, where the idea is that we can make bricks in the village in a simple method using a machine, using local soil, sand and a bit of cement. Compress it, and they can make their own bricks and build their dream house. We started doing this in one village in Majika and Sodorberg. There was a lot of skepticism in the beginning. We were making the bricks and people were wondering if it's going to work. Once we had built the walls up to this level, everyone was convinced. And they made a big meeting and basically said, like, let's build all the houses in this technology. And I think the main reason, maybe the most important thing here was that when rebuilding, the main thing is to take the idea of the community. What do they want? It was very clear that they wanted something of bricks. At the same time, they couldn't afford the traditional burnt bricks. So the earth bricks becomes a very interesting alternative. So how it works basically is that our concept now in Build Up Nepal, we're working together with other NGOs, with INGOs. We teach local communities how to make their own construction material. What they do is basically like we collect soil, sand and cement. The amount of sand depends on what kind of soil they have. So we test their soil and see how much sand is already in it. And then we mix it all together, compress it in a simple machine and create an earth brick. And what's so interesting about this is that when working and building a local material in this way, we can also create jobs local in the village. We have found on average, every machine that we set up creates between 6 to 12 job opportunities in the village. And that's kind of the start of getting the economy going. In some villages where we have been building, the community takes ownership of the machine and they use it to lower the cost of the houses. Because what happens is that if In some villages, if the people are very poor, they usually don't have money, but they might have more possibility of working. So what they do then instead is they can come, they can use the machine, they can make their own bricks together, and instead of buying for bricks, they produce them. In other villages, a small team takes ownership of the machine, they produce the bricks and they sell them, they make that into their living, form a small construction company, make the bricks and build the houses. And the other locals, they are working someplace else, earning money and paying for it, getting the local economy started. And that's why it's so important to use these local materials, that in this way the majority of the construction budget ends up in the village, instead of ending up in Kathmandu or eventually even in India. The other thing that's really important about earthbrick is that it's a technology that we can use to build high quality construction. What I find important is the houses we are building today, they are meant to last 70 years. So the question we have to ask ourselves is not how should we want to live today, but how do people want to live 50 years from now? What kind of house is a good house? If we're building something for today, we shouldn't build the way we built 20 years ago. We have to step it up, not only in terms of earthquake resistant, we have to step it up in terms of like if people are going to keep on staying and living in those villages, we need to upgrade the living standard. And that means one part of it, better housing. So what's interesting about earthbrick is that we can get the same quality construction that we get from fired bricks and cement out in remote villages. And what's also interesting is that I'm not saying earthbrick is not the best construction material in Nepal. Earthbrick is the best construction material in Nepal in specific regions. Especially when you go to villages that has dirt road access, or maybe that is 2 hours off the road, or villages that is not highly accessible. That's where it's the best, because if you're, for example, in Bhaktapur, buying bricks is not a big problem. As well as most people who afford land there could probably afford to buy bricks as well. While the further away you go, what happens is that it gets more and more expensive to transport and bring these bricks. But the price of the earth bricks remains the same, because you produce them on site. And that's what's important. I don't believe that there is one construction material that is ideal for Nepal. There is a lot of different materials. Earth bricks is really good in this situation. Fired bricks is great for the cities. There is concrete hollow blocks that is really good along the highways. There is other technologies such as earth bags, which I think is a really good technology when you go even further away from the road. Because with earth bricks you also come to some limitations. If you need to carry the machine on your back for 4 days, it is going to get heavy. You also need to use cement, iron bars, and sand, a lot of other equipment. So normally we see earth bricks is at the best on villages with dirt road access, or villages up to 2 hours walk, or if there is further walk, where there is a river nearby. If there is a river nearby, means we have sand nearby, and if we have sand nearby, we can produce cheap bricks. But if you need to carry sand from a river up to a hill for 4 hours on your back, it's not feasible. And then there is other technologies that is more suitable. So it's very important when considering how to rebuild that one material is not the best material everywhere, but some material can be ideal for certain locations. We work a lot with something we call community-driven reconstruction. There has been, after the earthquake, a lot of talk about owner-driven reconstruction, that the owners themselves should rebuild their houses. And we believe in that too, and that's great, but it's even better when you can make the whole community come together and do this as a joint project. Because there is a strength that is much stronger when the whole community joins up. It's very, very hard for two people to make their own bricks and build their own house. And the difference is that we have seen in some villages where the community has been strong, they have been able to come together, they have formed small teams. So normally if we're building, say, 10 houses at the same time, from each house, 1 or 2 people joins the team. And for each house, then total, they become 8 people, they make the bricks. Another few people, they build the house and then they rotate. They build a few days on one house, go to the next, and they build there, go to the next and build there. It's a highly effective way to rebuild. It lowers the cost for everyone's house. So what we are trying to encourage people is to make sure that this doesn't become an individual project. It has to become a project for the whole and entire community. That's when we find the highest efficiency. It's also important to see earth bricks as the context of, in general, in Nepal. We are in a situation where the demand for bricks on a national level in Nepal, we need 9 billion bricks per year. 9 billion bricks per year is needed. The current capacity in the installed plants is 3 billion. So there is a 6 billion lack of bricks. And a lot of these brick factories are expanding, so they're going to produce more and more and more. But it means there is a huge demand, because the brick factories is primarily going to supply the cities and the towns and the villages along the highway. It's going to take a long time before this material reaches out in the villages. That's why there is a huge potential for earth bricks and other materials. It's also very important from an environmental perspective. Fired bricks made in a brick factory is very, very bad for the environment. It produces huge amount of carbon emissions. If we compare when building 1 square meter of wall from earth bricks, it is less than it's between 10 to 5 times less emissions, depending on what brick factory is used, than it is compared to fired bricks. And if we are talking about rebuilding 600,000 houses, it's going to make a major impact. We made a calculation at one point. We have seen that realistically, we don't think that 600,000 houses will be done by earth bricks. But if we look at those villages where earth bricks are most suitable with the dirt road access, then it is quite realistic to rebuild about 50,000 houses in this technology over the next 3 years. 50,000 houses will turn out into about 500 million tons of carbon emissions. And that's roughly equivalent of 165,000 trips with a plane between London and Bangkok two-way. And that makes a major impact to our environment, because the construction materials has is a huge part of the carbon emissions worldwide and in Nepal. But like I mentioned before here, it's all about changing. Where does the money for the construction project end up? Does it come to the brick factories in Kathmandu, or does it end up with the villages in the village itself, creating further development, making it possible for others to afford to reconstruct? To give an example what a finished earth brick house can look like, we're almost finished, we're still in the process of painting it. One other advantage of earth brick is that you don't need to plaster it, as you normally do with regular bricks. You can just paint directly on the bricks. Or in case of using red mud, rato mud, like we say in Nepal, you don't need to paint it also. It looks beautiful by itself. So, looking at costs, because that's also one of the key factors here. I mean, affordability makes a major difference. Is this an affordable material? So I have put together a quick cost comparison using earth bricks and fire bricks in different locations. So first of all, we have 2 types of earth bricks. We have the ones that is 15 centimeter wide and ones that is 25 centimeter wide. The 25 centimeter wide is normally used for 2-story buildings, while the thinner ones are used for single-story buildings. And we can compare this with fire bricks. And I've put in my comparison here with those that has villages with a blacktop road, or villages that is approximately 2 hours away on a dirt road. And if you look at what happens, the cost of producing earth bricks is 41 for the smaller ones, 46 for the bigger ones. This is an average cost that we have calculated based on, today we are producing in 25 villages in different districts around Nepal. On that we have an average of these production costs. The lowest price of bricks that you can find is 12 rupees per brick. Normally, in many places it's much higher than that, but that's basically the lowest cost you find for bricks of any kind of reasonable quality. On top of that you add some transportation costs, meaning that a brick might cost 15 rupees or 20 rupees depending on your location. If you go further away, it can cost even more. Now the important thing to remember is that an earth brick is about 3 to 4.5 times bigger than a regular brick. So that's why even if this looks like it's more expensive, it's in fact a lot cheaper. We have then done a calculation what happens when you build 1 square meter of wall to see what is the implications of this. In building a square meter wall, you need 34 of these bricks, 40 of these ones, or 144 of the burnt bricks. That's basically the difference. You're going to need 2 bags of cement compared to 0.8. You're going to need 2 hours of manpower compared to 4. And of course we also have to remember that your thickness of wall is different. With these bricks you get a 15 centimeter wall, here you're having a 25 centimeter wall, and with the fire bricks you have a 22 centimeter wall. But as you can see when we come down to the bottom line here, on average 1 square meter of wall is 1800 rupees with these bricks, 2500 with the bigger bricks, 3500 with the burnt bricks, and around 4200 if you're on the dirt road. Meaning that we can build these bricks at almost half the cost. That's not half the cost of the house, that's half the cost of the wall. Because you're still going to have to make a foundation, you're still going to have to do your roofing, doors and windows and other materials in the same way. When we add this up, we have seen roughly the earth brick houses are roughly 30% cheaper than a house that is built by brick in a village with a dirt road. So to summarize that, you say the savings is in different places. The savings is on one hand, it's the bricks itself, but it's also the transportation costs, it is the mortar, it is the manpower, and it is the plaster. And then of course, aside from the savings itself, where does that money go? I mentioned earlier here that there is different sizes and kinds of bricks. To give you an idea, there is different machines that make them. This is what we call the interlocking earth brick press. It's a similar model. Small brick press, quite portable, weighs 125 kilos, can be dismantled and carried out into remote villages. There is a bigger version, heavy-duty earth brick press, produces the bigger bricks, has higher capacity and is more suitable for a little bit larger scale projects. And I wanted to show you a brief video to see how this looks in reality. Let's see, whoa. Working on the settings. So this is a smaller brick press from our training in Galchok in Gorka. This is on the first day of training, so they're just learning to take them out of the machine. It's quite easy. Women can do it, you don't have to be very strong. But normally we need a team of 6 to 7 people to operate the machine, do the mixing and produce everything. Then we make a concrete foundation. We put the bricks on top of it and we put rebars through the holes. This is very important for the earthquake resistance. The rebars is going all the way through the wall, both vertically and horizontally through the seismic bands. They're also interlocking, you see that they stick together like pieces of Lego. That's also one thing that makes them stronger, that they don't fall apart in an earthquake like stone can do. Horizontal bands holding everything together. And you see the rebars coming up through the walls here. So they're going all the way through, they're not only in the pillars, they're all the way scattered throughout the wall. This is the bigger machine. And this is how it works. It's a bit faster to operate. You can make, if you work fast, 2 bricks per minute. A little bit slower on average, I think, they're taking 1 brick out in 45 seconds. And this process is what we should never forget. Mobilizing the villagers. We do a lot of work with going out in the village, going through different kind of house models, trying to figure out what kind of land people have, what house will fit on it, how they can build it in several stages, maybe what they can afford now and what they can afford 2 years later. And the process is you dig out soil, local soil, usually we can make a terrace, filter it, mix it with sand and cement. The mixing is in fact the most important part of the production process. It's not what is done in the machine is easy. This is what determines the quality of the brick. And here's some example of the finished house. Majigao is one of the places where we're building. We have recently completed 16 houses there, and we have plans to build the next 10 now over the next 3 months. So what we are working on in Build Up Nepal is like we have implemented this technology in 25 villages until now. And our focus is to spread it out into as many villages as possible, while at the same time, of course, making sure that each of these 25 that we've already started will succeed and can continue making these bricks for a very long time. Because this reconstruction is not something that's going to be, it's already been almost 2 years, 1.5 years. It's going to be another 3, 4, 5 years before this is done. And even after the reconstruction phase is over, we want this to set this trend of not just how we reconstruct, but how we build in Nepal in a long-term way. The same technology that we're using here in Sindupal Chowk, in Taoyaka, in the earthquake district, will be perfectly suitable in more remote districts of Nepal as well. That was not hit by the earthquake this time, but the next time there is an earthquake, it might hit other districts. So it's important to remember we're not just doing this to rebuild the district that was broken. We have to implement better construction technologies throughout the entire country. Otherwise we have another quake and maybe those districts are going to fare better, but what happens to the others? Wanted to take a short break here, and I hope you have a lot of questions. And I want you not to be shy.
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah?
Yeah, and you talked about the earthquakes and like construction of the buildings, but what about the mortar?
The mortar? Yes. When we're working with earthquakes, we use normal cement mortar. It's the same mortar that we're using in regular brick construction. You can, if you want, mix a small amount of soil in it, but it's quite a minor amount. At the same time, we are reducing the amount of mortar, as you saw from my calculation before. When you use bricks, you have bricks, and in between every brick you put 1 centimeter of mortar everywhere. The difference is the earthquake is much bigger, and they don't require you to put the mortar between them. You just pour the mortar through the holes. And that has 2 advantages. You need almost 1/3 as much mortar as you would need otherwise. For the wall part, you still need to do the beams, and you need a lot of cement there. But for the mortar, you need a lot less, and it's also much faster and easier to do it. And the easiness is important because it also means that we don't have enough skilled masons to rebuild these broken villages. We need to have technologies that is easy to learn, quick to adapt, that new people can learn and start working with.
Are there any alternatives to like cement mortar?
The only alternative that you can do stabilized soil mortar. What that means is you do very similar to when you do the bricks. You combine the mortar that you have, but you add round about 20% of soil in it. That means you're reducing your amount of... No, you're not really reducing your amount of cement, you're reducing your amount of sand. So because you're still going to need the same amount of cement, you still need your mortar to be strong. You can offset the cement for lime, but we have found it to not be a realistic alternative for Nepal for 2 reasons. One thing is that it's not very easily available. The other thing is that people in Nepal, especially in the rural areas, love cement. They trust cement. They know that if I put cement, it's going to be strong. If you put lime, what's that? How's it going to work? So we're trying to not introduce multiple technologies at the same time. Please, more questions?
And you saw that there's different kinds of brick you proposed for the village areas, and there were 2 kinds. One was 150 mm and the other was 250 mm.
Yes.
And you specifically said that one was for single-story building and one was for building higher stories. So what are the main reasons behind proposing 2 bricks of different thicknesses?
The main reason is that the smaller bricks that is 150 mm wide is obviously cheaper. They're cheaper to produce, they're cheaper to build with. But once you, and they're very suitable for being built single story and an attic as well you can keep for storage. But if you want to build double story, those bricks won't be strong enough to take the load of that. Or, in fact, there is research that says it is strong, there is a debate going on. We want to be on the safer side on that. So once doing double story, we recommend the thicker bricks that is way strong enough for it to do a double story. You can still, however, build single story with the thinner bricks, but then you have to add a concrete pillar, and your cost of the building goes up. So that's why what we normally recommend is that the small bricks for single 1.5 story buildings, once you want to go full double story or 2.5 story, switch to the bigger bricks. However, if you're going more than 2 stories, you need to add concrete pillars.
And another one with this cold season coming, and what about the thermal performance for the 150 mm of brick?
The thermal performance of both kinds of bricks is far better than cement and better than traditional cement buildings, but it's not the highly insulated materials. We don't have any real insulation in there, so you can compare it like it's going to be similar to a brick building in the end of the day. Slightly better. Come on. Yeah?
If you don't have questions, you're not going to pass. So you better have questions.
I think I got full marks. Questions, I think.
My question is how this construction or how this building has responded to intangible aspects of the village. Like there might be a certain culture to
Yes.
the building that they have been living, which was disrupted by the earthquake. But how this kind of new technology that you have introduced or which you have planning to introduce has responded to the the cultural aspects or the outlook, general outlook of the village.
There is one interesting thing that we have faced. One of the challenges that we're facing, in fact, is almost the opposite. Most of the people in the village want to move away from the traditional architecture, and the most common thing we get is like, okay, I want a square house that looks like someone has built in Kathmandu. That's the most common requirement we get. It is often the other way around. It is often, in fact, that ourselves saying like, don't you want to incorporate some of the traditional architectural elements in this? And it's a convincing process to make them sure, which is like that can actually add a value as well. It is different in some communities because this is highly different depending on ethnicities and what kind of communities they have. But in majority of the villages, in fact, in 24 out of 25, people want to move towards. They look at Kathmandu and they want what we have here, and that basically means a square box. So usually the struggle is the other way around. How do we make it more like the traditional? How do we retain the beauty? And that's also it's quite obvious reasons. First of all, you look at what is done in the cities, and we don't have much beautiful architecture in Kathmandu, unfortunately. The other thing that's happening is the major factor is cost, because most families out in these villages have a very, very hard time being able to afford to rebuild their house. And if they get to prioritize design or size, they will have one more room every day. Because for most families they're building now, they are building houses that is smaller than what they had before because they can't afford it. They have plans to extend and expand in the future, but that's why, like, when looking at what is the cheapest house to build, it's a rectangular shape house. In most cases, using wooden beams and these things that we did traditionally has been got more expensive, while iron trusses is getting cheaper. CGI sheets, very cheap roofing materials, and in the end of the day, cost and cost and cost is what it comes down to. And that is very understandable if you think about who are the people building these houses. For them it is about being able to have 3 rooms or 4 rooms. It's about being able to have maybe 3 rooms instead of 2 rooms. But they had 5 rooms in their old house. Because the problem is building earthquake resistant, regardless of what material, is always going to be more expensive than building traditionally without any kind of resistance, just stacking up stone and mud. That's the cheapest way to do it. It's not the safe way to do it.
Come on, folks. We're waiting. You must have some good questions.
Challenge me. You can ask the difficult ones.
What are the roofing materials being used?
The materials.
Roofing materials.
Roofing materials. Until now, we have seen that in almost every place we start suggesting, like, why don't we use these different kind of tiles and stuff? In the end of the day, it's a CGI sheet that's being used.
So is there any inspiration for the CGI sheets?
What we normally do, we have tried a few things. We have tried insulating the CGI sheet with gypsum board, we have tried insulating them with bamboo, treated bamboo, and we have tried insulating them with plywood. Until now, the most effective method in terms of combining both cost and actual insulation it gives has been the plywood. Plywood, yeah. The difference is that when there's 2 ways to do it. Either when you have your roofing like this, you put another roof like this as insulation. Then a plywood is the simplest way to get a decent amount of insulation at a low cost, and that's still going to last you quite a while. The other way you can do is you can also put your roof here, and you can put your kind of like a ceiling in this side of the way. The advantage of that is you actually get an attic. And when you get an attic, what you normally do is you build a floor there. So you'll have a wooden floor, it could be with wood, it could be with bamboo and some dirt on top. There's many different designs for that. And that serves as insulating everything below. That means the attic itself won't be insulated, but the attic serves as insulation for the house below it. And that's a very effective way to do, because in most villages, they need the attic. Attic is used traditionally for storing food. And in this way you kind of get both at once. You don't have to spend extra for the insulation because it's done as part of the attic.
So for the downstory, the first floor slab is concrete or?
It doesn't need to be. That also depends on where you are. In more accessible villages, it's going to be. Again, the further away you go, concrete gets more expensive. Wooden flooring also works out fine. That doesn't. But on the other hand, when building with earth bricks, you need cement mortar. You need concrete bands, seismic bands. You can't replace those with wooden bands, but you can build a wooden floor resting on a steel truss.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
To second phase. You still have some presentation?
No, I'm actually hoping for the questions that you have, and more
Come on,
question answer.
I am shocked, okay? I am shocked. Here you have an opportunity to show how smart you are, okay? This is your great opportunity. Is your instructor here? He's not here. Okay, well, I'll be reporting then, so we better ask some tough questions.
I have a question. Actually, this is a problem that the people of Bhaktapur are facing. Well, the Bhaktapur is famous for its construction of brick factories, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is that because they produce all the bricks, most of the bricks that they are using in Kashmir Valley over there, there is a problem of a loss of cultivable land.
Mm.
But in villages, most people are also dependent on agriculture.
Yes.
So how does it affect their agricultural lands?
That is a very good question, because that's one. I mean, especially also the village. Many people in the villages have limited amount of land also, and those land are badly need for farming. When using earthbricks, we never use the topsoil. The farmable soil is, first of all, we need it for farming, but it's also unsuitable to do earthbricks with, because there is organic matter in it, and it can rot. So we always take the soil that is 2 feet below the surface. When digging out the soil also, it's really important to consider the environment. The common mistake would be like, okay, let's dig a pit and take out the soil. And that pit is, in the rainy season, it's going to become into a pond. In the dry season, it's going to be a garbage dump. So what we try to teach instead is that make a terrace. When digging out a terrace, it's the most effective way to get dirt out. At the same time, you're actually helping out to create a better farmable land. So it kind of builds up from both things. You can also take a little bit of soil from the foundation, but the main thing is build terraces. And that's one thing we can not have enough of in Nepal.
Okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to ask some questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when I saw this, we went out and, and we saw this, I was thinking back on the construction I do in my house, where I'm using concrete, and I'm drilling into the concrete.
Mm.
And it occurred to me that those, if we go to the picture of those bricks, if we can go to the picture on your slides.
We are here.
Of the actual earth bricks.
Oh, this one. Oh wait, it's.
So I think we may have, we have to get back to the PowerPoints.
Yeah. Let me see. We go for. Here you can see them. Yeah.
Okay, so the edges that you're using it's very effective for being able to create the holes through which you're going to be both pouring the concrete, the mortar, and to be able for the steel. But if there were to be another earthquake, that is relatively thin. And is that a place that could fracture and break? And does that present a potential issue in terms of the stability of this style versus, if you just have holes, you fill them up. But here you've got this added thing that could shear. Is that an issue? Have people thought about that?
Yeah, people smarter than me has thought about that. So this technology is not something that we came up with. It's adopted. It's been used for around 50 years. Widely used after earthquake in Gujarat earthquake in India, in Thailand, in New Zealand, in different places. And the concept actually is that all these holes, they make, of course, the brick a bit weak before you fill them. Once they're filled with concrete, they make it into a solid piece. And at the same time, the important thing here is that when we have an earthquake, what really happens is that, let me see, if you have a wall and it shakes, this wall is going to want to fall like this, no? Or like this. It's not going to fall in this direction, right? So the main concept of earthquake resistant is we want to avoid having singular walls. We want to make them into a square. If this and this wall is tied together, then when this wall wants to fall this way, that wall wants to fall this way. If they catch each other, neither one is going to fall in any way. It's the same thing as if you have a thin thing or if you have a thick thing, the thick one is going to be hard to make it fall. That's why we want to bind these things together. We bind them together by putting vertical rebars through them and horizontal rebars around them, interconnecting it. The other part, and that is a common weakness of a stone wall. In a stone wall, if a single stone falls out, it's very easy that all the other stones comes with it. Yeah? That's why we have two aspects here. Basically, instead of having one big concrete pillar in every corner, we have small concrete pillars going through each and every brick, from up to down, all the way through. In some of them, we put rebars. The rebars we put at every opening, and we put it every 1.5 meter of wall. And that links this together. On top of that, we have the interlocking structure, that the bricks actually stick together, which means that it is very, very, very difficult to get one brick and to shake it out of there. They don't come out, they act as a single piece. And that is the one thing we want to achieve when building something earthquake resistant, that the whole house acts as one piece. However, like I'm saying here, is there a risk of shear? There is always a risk of shear, and especially that's also why for the thinner brick of 15 centimeter, 1.5 story is what we recommend as maximum. Because the more higher you go and the more load you put, the higher the chance of the shear, and that's when you need to increase the thickness of your wall to avoid that. We can also look at the compressive strength of these bricks. We have seen now that on average the bricks that we are producing is around 70 kilonewton per centimeter. That's the average value, strength value of our bricks. If we compare that, it's fairly similar to the strength of 5 bricks. So the bricks themselves are similar strength of 5 bricks. In some places they're stronger, some places they're slightly weaker, but there is no major difference. And then we're talking good quality 5 bricks. What you get in the villages is often lower than that. And that's also one thing that there is a long time ago, like I don't know exactly how many years, but the hollow concrete blocks became quite popular in Nepal in rural areas. So you make these hollow concrete blocks with concreting in them, right? The problem that has happened with those is a lot of entrepreneurs have adopted those, which is a great thing, but it has been adopted without proper quality check. So the quality of hollow concrete blocks, especially if you start going out in the remote areas, is dangerously low. And that has also resulted in that people have stopped trusting them. They know that they're good and effective and fast to build with, but the trust factor is not always there. And this is one thing that we need to really, really avoid when introducing earth bricks as a construction material. That we need to make sure that how do we maintain quality, because the quality depends on how you make them. Just like hollow concrete blocks can be really, really strong if you make them well, and really, really weak if you don't make them well. And in the earth bricks, the quality of these earth bricks comes back to a number of things. The most important is your mix. It's not about the machine primary. The primary is how do you mix it. It works in fact like this. Remember, we have 4 components here. We have sand, soil, cement, and compression. Yeah? And the common question we get in the village is, but soil and cement won't bind together. True. It doesn't need to. In every earth bricks we have at least 50% sand. A lot of the sand is usually already there in the soil. On average, the soil in Nepal contains about 25% sand, but it varies with different villages and different locations. So if there is 25% sand already in the soil, we add another 25 to 30 to make sufficient amount of sand. What happens is the sand and the cement binds together, just like sand and cement do. The soil is what gets compressed, because if you try to compress sand, it's not going to happen much. It's the soil that gets compressed. So it's kind of the cement and sand binds, the soil and the compression binds, and all 4 together creates a strong brick. The most common mistake is not to mix too less cement. The most common mistake is to mix too less sand. You think that we have, in fact, one village that we came to, we had one individual who brought some machines there, set it up. They didn't know how to mix it properly, so they just put soil, cement, and compressed it. They didn't add enough sand, and the bricks are very, very weak. And it doesn't matter then, even if you add 25% of cement, it's still going to be weak. So what you need to make sure is that you have the right mix, and that you mix it carefully. Another common mistake is that you mix it a bit quickly, and that means that the sand is in one place, the soil is in another, the cement is in a third. And then you have a very weak brick. You have to make sure the mixing is properly, and you have to make sure how to quality test those bricks after you're done. So one thing that we are trying to teach everyone is, first of all, how to test the soil, how to figure out how much to mix from it, and then also after you've done your bricks, to have a penetrometer. It's called a little tool that you press into the brick to see how deep inside it goes, how hard the brick has been compressed. And then you make a second test after 48 hours. You check if the edges, if they put the edges like this, if it comes off, you have done something wrong in your mix. after another 7 days, we can measure the compressive strength of the brick and see if it has reached at least 50% of its final strength. We can also soak it in water. If it starts dissolving, we have a problem. And the key that I believe is to keep maintaining this quality is to teach not only the entrepreneurs who's going to be producing and selling those bricks how to check the quality, but to teach the locals how to check the quality. Once the local villagers know how we create a brick of quality, they will make sure that the people doing it in their village, who's going to be using it to build their houses, will do it right. But that means that when we train people, it is important not only to train the people who's going to make the bricks, it is important to train the entire community. The more people who has the knowledge of how this works and how to check and how to know what quality it's supposed to have, how strong is the brick supposed to be, the more people in the village knowing that, the more they're going to be able to maintain the quality in the long term.